There's a difference between being popular and being historic. Plenty of artists have had massive careers, sold out stadiums, topped charts. But what BTS did, and keeps doing, sits in a category that most industry analysts weren't even equipped to measure when it started happening. These aren't vanity metrics or algorithm flukes. We're talking about records held by official institutions: Billboard, Guinness World Records, YouTube, the Recording Industry Association of America, the United Nations. Records that weren't broken incrementally. They were shattered so completely that the gap between BTS and whoever's in second place looks less like a competition and more like a different sport entirely. And here's the thing that makes this genuinely worth paying attention to. Several of these records weren't just set once. They were set, broken, reset, and broken again by the same group. What does it actually take to do that? What's behind the numbers? And more importantly, given where the music industry is right now, with streaming fragmentation, shorter attention spans, and 1,000 new artists launching every week, is there a realistic path for any group to get close? Let's go through 8 of them and let the facts speak for themselves.
Number 8. They broke their own YouTube record twice. When Dynamite dropped on August 21, 2020, YouTube servers took a hit that the platform hadn't seen from a music release before. In exactly 24 hours, the video racked up 101.1 million views, a Guinness World Record for the most viewed YouTube music video in its first 24 hours. That was already an extraordinary number on its own, but what made it stranger and frankly more telling about where BTS stood relative to the rest of the music industry was what happened 9 months later. On May 21, 2021, BTS released Butter, and in the next 24 hours, it pulled in 108.2 million views. They didn't just break the record, they broke their own record. The group that set the ceiling came back and raised it themselves. Guinness World Records certified both. That's not a footnote, that's a pattern. To understand why this matters beyond the raw numbers, you have to understand what 108 million views in 24 hours actually means in practical terms. YouTube's global daily active user base sits at over 2 billion people. The platform serves videos in every country across every category: news, sports, gaming, education, comedy, everything. For a single music video to capture 108 million views in one day, in competition with literally everything else on the platform simultaneously, requires a concentration of coordinated attention that is almost structurally difficult to manufacture. And yet, BTS did it. Not once, but in back-to-back major releases separated by less than a year. The Dynamite record didn't come out of nowhere. The song was strategically significant for BTS from the start. It was their first entirely English-language single, a deliberate pivot designed to reach a broader global audience during the COVID-19 pandemic, when touring revenue had collapsed industry-wide, and digital performance had become the primary metric by which labels and analysts judged an act's commercial health. Big Hit Entertainment, now HYBE, knew what they were releasing and when. The video launched at midnight Korean Standard Time, which gave the ARMY fandom across Asia, Europe, and the Americas a coordinated launch window. Streaming guides circulated within the fandom well before the release date, mapping out optimal play counts per region per time zone. That level of fan infrastructure, organized, self-sustaining, and operating without any direct coordination from the group or label, is itself something that has no comparable equivalent in the modern music industry. Other fandoms are enthusiastic. ARMY is systematically operational. What Butter demonstrated in May 2021 was that Dynamite wasn't a ceiling, it was a floor. Butter was, on its surface, a straightforward funk-influenced pop track, shorter than Dynamite, with a simpler hook structure. There was nothing about the song itself that would predict it would outperform its predecessor's record by over 7 million views in a single day. But the record didn't come from the song alone. It came from the compound effect of everything BTS had built by that point: an expanded global fan base, a dedicated streaming infrastructure within the ARMY community, and an international media presence that generated coverage across entertainment, mainstream news, and social media simultaneously, all within the first hours of a release. The video crossed 10 million views in its first hour. It hit 50 million before the day was half over. By the time the 24-hour window closed, the 108.2 million figure was confirmed, and Guinness updated their records. For context on the competitive landscape, in 2021, the closest any other act came to challenging that 24-hour record was significantly lower. Major Western artists with enormous global fan bases, acts with decades of brand equity, massive label infrastructure, and cross-platform promotional campaigns were achieving first-day view counts that were impressive but not in the same numerical territory. The gap between BTS's record-setting performance and the rest of the field wasn't marginal. It was large enough that it prompted serious discussion among music industry analysts about whether the record was even reachable by any act operating under standard release conditions.
The structural reasons behind this are worth examining carefully. Most artists release music and rely on algorithmic amplification, playlist placement, radio promotion, and organic social sharing to build viewership over days and weeks. BTS benefits from all of those same mechanisms, but also from something that operates on top of them, a fandom that treats streaming as a coordinated activity rather than a passive one. ARMY members share streaming guides, monitor real-time count dashboards, set personal daily streaming goals, and hold each other accountable through fan community platforms. This is not unique to BTS in concept. Other fandoms do versions of this, but the scale, the global coordination, and the sustained consistency of ARMY's streaming behavior has no documented equivalent. A 2020 analysis of Twitter activity surrounding major music releases identified BTS-related tags as consistently generating engagement volumes that dwarfed those of comparable releases by Western and other Korean artists. There is also a technical dimension to this record that rarely gets mentioned. When Butter launched and began accumulating views at that rate, YouTube's infrastructure was handling the load across its standard global CDN architecture. The kind of traffic that 108 million views in 24 hours generates, factoring in repeated plays, which Guinness counting methodology accounts for under its guidelines, represents a meaningful volume of bandwidth and server load. YouTube's systems are built for scale, but the specific pattern of a single video receiving that concentrated, sustained traffic across a compressed time window is the kind of edge case that their engineering teams take note of. The record still stands as of the time this was written. No music video released after Butter has crossed 108 million first-day YouTube views. To be clear, the record for most YouTube views in a 24-hour window overall belongs to a different video type. Live stream events have produced higher numbers, but for a standard music video, the Butter figure remains the benchmark. And the logical question that follows is, who breaks it? Any act attempting to challenge this record would need to mobilize a global fan base of comparable size, coordination, and streaming discipline, all within a 24-hour window from a cold start at midnight. The artists who come close to BTS's level of global reach, Taylor Swift, Drake, Bad Bunny, each have massive audiences, but the specific combination of fandom coordination and geographic spread that powers BTS's YouTube performance is something that has developed over nearly a decade and is not easily replicated on a shorter timeline. Breaking this record isn't just about being popular, it requires a specific ecosystem, and that ecosystem, built deliberately by BTS and ARMY together over years of consistent output, is the hardest part to duplicate. And if the YouTube record gives you a sense of how BTS performs on a single platform in a single day, wait until you see what they did to Twitter on a global scale and what it cost the platform's infrastructure to document it.
Number 7. Over 100 consecutive weeks at the top of the social chart. Before BTS entered the Billboard Social 100, there was Justin Bieber.
From 2014 through early 2016, Bieber held the #1 position on that chart for 96 consecutive weeks, a record that at the time felt like something close to permanent. The Billboard Social 100 isn't a sales chart or a streaming chart. It measures cross-platform social media activity, engagements, mentions, shares, and interactions across Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, and Wikipedia, aggregated weekly into a single ranking of which artist is generating the most global digital conversation at any given moment. 96 weeks of the top meant that for nearly 2 straight years, no artist on the planet, not Taylor Swift, not Rihanna, not Drake, was commanding more collective online attention than Justin Bieber. It was considered a high watermark for modern pop's relationship with social media. Then BTS showed up and held it for longer. The context surrounding how BTS entered this space matters, because it didn't happen overnight, and it wasn't engineered by a label with a standard Western rollout strategy. BTS first appeared on the Billboard Social 100 in late 2016, at a point when Korean acts were still largely considered a regional phenomenon by mainstream Western music industry observers. K-pop had existed on the global radar since Psy's Gangnam Style went viral in 2012, but that was widely treated as an isolated novelty rather than a signal of a structural shift. When BTS began climbing the Social 100, a chart tracked by one of the most authoritative music industry publications in the world, analysts took notice, but many assumed it was a temporary surge driven by a particularly coordinated fan campaign. What happened instead was that BTS reached #1 on the Billboard Social 100 in May 2017 and did not leave. Week after week, through comeback cycles, military service news, award season, off-seasons, and every kind of music industry calendar fluctuation that normally causes even the biggest artists' social metrics to ebb and flow, BTS held that position for over 100 consecutive weeks. To fully appreciate what that number means, consider what it implies by the sheer sustained volume of global engagement surrounding BTS across multiple platforms simultaneously. The Social 100 isn't measuring one platform in isolation, it's an aggregate. For a single act to dominate an aggregate social chart for more than 100 weeks means they are generating top-tier engagement across every major social platform at the same time, consistently, week after week, regardless of whether they've released new music that week or not. Most artists spike on these charts around a release or a major public event and then recede. BTS's curve was different. Their baseline engagement, the floor of their week-to-week social activity, even in quiet periods, was high enough to maintain a #1 position against the best individual weeks of other artists around them. This is directly attributable to the structural behavior of the ARMY fandom, but it goes deeper than just enthusiastic fans. ARMY operates across time zones in a way that functions like a self-sustaining content engine. Fan accounts on Twitter generate daily trending topics. Fan projects on Instagram create visual content that circulates widely. Fan discussion on Weverse and Reddit feeds into Wikipedia edits and YouTube comment activity. Every single one of these data points feeds into the Social 100. The result is that BTS's social presence functions less like a traditional artist's marketing campaign and more like a continuously running media operation, maintained not by a PR team, but by millions of individual fans whose combined activity is statistically indistinguishable from something that was centrally coordinated. It wasn't. That's the remarkable part. The 2017 Billboard Music Awards became a pivotal public moment in this story. BTS won the Top Social Artist Award, a category that had been dominated by Justin Bieber for 6 consecutive years. Their win made international headlines because it was the first time a K-pop group had won a major category at the BBMAs, and it happened at an event that Bieber himself had historically owned. The award is voted on by fans via social media engagement, which made it a direct measurement of the very phenomenon the Social 100 was already documenting. The response online was immediate and global. BTS's win generated what Twitter described internally as one of the highest engagement spikes around a single award show moment in the platform's history at that point. That win and the coverage it generated only accelerated the engine that was already running. In 2018, Twitter released annual data confirming that BTS was the most tweeted about celebrity account globally. In 2019, they retained that status. Their official account, @BTS_TWT, routinely generated tweet and retweet volumes that outpaced not just other music acts, but also major sporting events, political figures, and global news moments, categories that typically dominate platform-wide trending data. Guinness World Records certified BTS as holding the record for most Twitter engagements for a music act, a record that captured the totality of their platform dominance in a single documented data point. The specific trigger posts, announcement tweets for new music, group birthday posts, fan anniversary messages, each produced engagement numbers that, had they come from a news event rather than a pop group, would have been treated as platform stress tests. The infrastructure implications of this are worth pausing on. Social media platforms are built to handle distributed, low-level engagement from millions of users. What they are occasionally not built for is the simultaneous, concentrated spike in activity that BTS releases produce. In 2019, when BTS dropped the trailer for the Map of the Soul Persona era, Twitter's mobile application experienced slowdowns in South Korea, Japan, and parts of the United States due to traffic volume. YouTube's comments section on BTS releases has required additional moderation resources because comment volume within the first hour routinely exceeds what the platform's standard automated systems are calibrated to handle. These aren't anecdotal observations. They've been referenced in technology journalism and social media analytics reporting as documented edge cases that BTS and ARMY reliably produce. The Billboard Social 100 record specifically reflects something that goes beyond streaming coordination or award show voting. A chart that measures the totality of social footprint, mentions, shares, page visits, video interactions, all of it. Staying at number 1 for over 100 consecutive weeks means that in the global competition for digital attention, across all genres, all languages, all continents, BTS was simply generating more of it than anyone else every single week for years. The chart eventually restructured its methodology, and the music landscape continued to shift, but the data from that run is documented and sits in Billboard's archive as one of the more statistically unusual stretches in the history of the chart. And for all of the social media dominance that this record documents, the Twitter records, the trending topics, the platform stress tests, none of it explains what BTS actually did to the most important music sales chart in the United States. That one belongs in a completely different conversation.
Number 6. The best-selling album in South Korean history. The shift from physical media to digital streaming in the early 2000s did not just disrupt the global music industry, it nearly annihilated the market for physical albums in South Korea. During the mid-1990s, physical album sales in South Korea were robust, peaking with Kim Gun-mo's 1995 studio album, Wrongful Meeting, which sold 3.3 million copies on CD and cassette. That record stood unchallenged for a quarter of a century as the domestic market transitioned rapidly to digital downloads and streaming platforms, leaving most top-tier Korean releases struggling to cross even the 100,000 physical sales threshold by the late 2000s. The industry consensus was that the era of multi-million-selling physical albums in Korea was gone forever, replaced by digital streams that paid fractions of a cent per play. During this digital transition, South Korean music consumption shifted almost entirely to platforms like Melon and Soribada, which offered low-cost monthly subscriptions. For major entertainment companies, the physical CD became a relic of a bygone era, prompting a strategic pivot toward digital single releases and domestic concert tours to maintain financial viability. The physical album was relegated to a promotional tool rather than a primary source of revenue.
BTS systematically dismantled this assumption by building a dedicated global community that viewed the physical release as a vital connection to the group. When BTS debuted in 2013 with Too Cool for School, their physical sales were modest, reflecting their status as artists from a small, independent agency without the distribution leverage of the industry's major labels. However, their physical sales grew exponentially with each release, reflecting their expanding global footprint. The release of The Most Beautiful Moment in Life Part 1 in 2015 marked their first major breakthrough in physical sales, crossing the 100,000 mark and demonstrating that their audience was willing to invest in physical media. This momentum accelerated with the release of Wings in 2016, which sold over 750,000 copies, and reached a new milestone with Love Yourself Tear in 2018, which became their first album to exceed 1 million copies in pure physical sales within a single month. This set the stage for Map of the Soul 7 in February 2020, an album that represented the culmination of their 7-year journey as a group and served as a direct reflection on their collective identity. The visual design of the album was also highly praised, featuring a multi-layered logo 7 created by the design studio Sparks Edition that layered 7 different typefaces to symbolize the unique personalities and journeys of the 7 members over their 7 years together. Even before the album hit retail shelves, the demand was historically unprecedented, with global pre-orders reaching 4.02 million copies within its first month of availability. When the album was officially released, Hanteo chart, which tracks real-time physical sales from participating retail outlets worldwide, registered over 2.65 million copies sold on the first day alone. Unlike typical global charts that rely on estimated sample sales, Hanteo chart requires real-time point-of-sale data from a registered network of family stores worldwide, making the recorded sales figures highly audited and verifiable. By the end of its first week, that number had surged to 3.37 million copies, meaning BTS had effectively matched the 25-year all-time record set by Kim Gun-mo in just 7 days. The Gaon Music chart, which tracks overall shipments minus returns, recorded 4.1 million copies sold in February 2020 alone, and by June of that year, Guinness World Records officially certified Map of the Soul 7 as the best-selling album in South Korean history with 4.26 million copies sold. The global industry watched in disbelief as BTS achieved these numbers in an era where physical media was treated as obsolete by the mainstream Western music industry. The album simultaneously debuted at #1 on the US Billboard 200, the UK Albums Chart, the Oricon Albums Chart in Japan, and the official charts of France, Germany, and Australia. In the United States, it debuted with 422,000 equivalent album units, of which 347,000 were pure album sales, making it the fastest-selling album of the year at that point. In Japan, the Oricon chart reported that Map of the Soul 7 topped its mid-year album sales ranking, making BTS the first foreign artist in 36 years to achieve this milestone, since Michael Jackson did so with Thriller in 1984. To achieve these numbers required a complete reimagining of what an album actually is. BTS did not just sell audio files, they sold a physical artifact designed to be collected. Map of the Soul 7 was released in 4 distinct concept versions, each featuring a large format box containing a 36-page photo book, a lyric book, a mini-book containing fictional lore, a poster, sticker sheets, and one of several collectible individual member photo cards. This physical packaging strategy, combined with the ARMY fandom's deep commitment to supporting the group's historical legacy, turned album purchasing into a collective, global event. Retailers across the world, from major U.S. chains like Target and Walmart to independent shops in Europe and South Korea, had to adjust their logistics networks to handle the sheer volume of physical imports required to meet demand on release day. The environmental and economic footprint of shipping millions of heavy, large-format box sets globally in the middle of a developing global pandemic was a logistical challenge that had never been tested at this scale for a Korean music release. Furthermore, the album's sales did not stagnate after the initial release window.
It continued to accumulate sales, eventually crossing the 5 million mark on the Circle chart, establishing a benchmark that remains unmatched by any other musical act in the country's history. The photo card trading economy also played a massive role, with fans buying multiple copies to collect their favorite members or trading cards online, creating a self-sustaining secondary market that kept the album relevant in social media discussions for months after its debut. This collector culture was further reinforced by the thematic content of the album itself. Map of the Soul 7 featured 20 tracks, including the lead single, On, which was accompanied by a massive performance filmed at Grand Central Terminal in New York City for The Tonight Show starring Jimmy Fallon. The song's themes of resilience and facing one's shadows resonated deeply with a global audience dealing with the onset of pandemic lockdowns, transforming the physical album into a source of comfort and solidarity. While subsequent releases by other K-pop acts had achieved significant physical sales due to the overall expansion of the global K-pop market, none have matched the cultural weight or the sheer velocity of Map of the Soul 7's record-breaking run, which occurred at the absolute peak of BTS's collective group activities before their mandatory military service began. The record represents a perfect storm of historical timing, fandom mobilization, and a physical distribution network operating at maximum capacity. It changed the way Western music executives viewed the viability of physical products, leading to a broader industry trend where major American and European pop artists began adopting K-pop-style packaging strategies, offering multiple vinyl variants, photo books, and collectible inserts to bolster their own chart positions. Despite these industry-wide shifts, the scale of BTS's achievement in their home country remains a statistical anomaly, a monument to a moment in music history when a single group managed to reverse a decades-long digital migration and make physical media the ultimate symbol of global dominance. But as impressive as it is to sell millions of physical boxes to dedicated collectors worldwide, it is another thing entirely to dominate the single most competitive, stream-dominated digital singles chart in the world, a feat that BTS achieved in a way that left even the most established industry giants looking for answers.
Number 5. First group to debut multiple songs at number 1 on the Billboard Hot 100. The Billboard Hot 100 has served as the definitive barometer of musical popularity in the United States since its inception in 1958, blending sales, radio airplay, and streaming data into a complex formula that measures which songs are capturing the American public's attention. Historically, the chart was structured around a gradual ascent, with songs climbing the ranks over several weeks or months as radio DJs added them to playlists and physical singles slowly trickled into retail stores across the country. The concept of a song debuting at number 1 was non-existent for the first 3 decades of the chart's history, only becoming possible with the introduction of electronic point-of-sale tracking via Nielsen SoundScan in 1991. The first song to debut at number 1 was Michael Jackson's You Are Not Alone in 1995. Even after the transition to the digital era, a number 1 debut remained an exceptionally rare feat, reserved for instances of overwhelming global anticipation. For a group to achieve this, they had to overcome not only the standard competitive field of solo pop giants, but also the structural barriers inherent in the American radio industry, which has historically been slow to support foreign language tracks or artists operating outside the traditional Western label system. If you look at the legendary groups that defined the history of popular music, the Beatles, the Bee Gees, Boyz II Men, and Destiny's Child, none of them ever debuted multiple songs at number 1 on the Hot 100. The Beatles, who hold the record for the most number 1 hits overall with 20, achieved all of their chart toppers through the traditional method of climbing the chart over time. When BTS entered the American market, they faced a landscape dominated by solo artists who benefited from massive streaming playlist placement and established radio relations. BTS's breakthrough occurred on September 5, 2020, when Dynamite debuted at number 1, driven by 265,000 digital downloads and 33.9 million streams in its first week. This was not merely the first time a Korean group had topped the chart. It was a demonstration of a direct-to-consumer sales model that bypasses the traditional gatekeepers of American radio. Dynamite was an English-language track, which allowed it to gain some traction on top 40 radio stations. But the true test of BTS's chart power came 3 months later with the release of Life Goes On. Released in November 2020 as the lead single for their album B, Life Goes On was a mid-tone ballad sung almost entirely in Korean. Under normal chart conditions, a non-English song without a massive viral dance trend faces nearly insurmountable odds on the Hot 100 due to a near-total lack of radio airplay. Yet, Life Goes On debuted at number 1, making it the first song sung primarily in a non-English language to debut at the top spot in the chart's history. Prior to this, only a handful of non-English songs had ever reached number 1 on the Hot 100, such as Domenico Modugno's Nel Blu de Pinto de Blue in 1958 and Los Lobos' La Bamba in 1987. But all of these songs required weeks of airplay accumulation to reach the top. Even the 2017 global hit Despacito by Luis Fonsi and Daddy Yankee required a remix featuring Justin Bieber and a months-long climb to capture the number 1 spot. BTS bypassed this entire developmental curve, proving that a Korean-language track could command the summit of the American music industry on day 1. The achievement was powered by a coordinated purchase campaign, where fans bought digital singles directly from the group's US web store, offsetting the near-zero radio audience impressions. This was a direct challenge to the traditional payola or promotional systems of American radio, where major labels spend substantial resources to secure airplay. By relying on their fan base to purchase the song directly, BTS exposed a structural loophole in the chart's weightings that favored active consumer choice over passive radio listening. In 2021, BTS took this to the logical extreme. Their second English single, Butter, debuted at number 1 on the chart, dated June 5, 2021. Columbia Records printed limited edition physical cassette and vinyl singles of Butter that were shipped directly to consumers during the tracking week. This physical shipment, combined with digital purchases, resulted in 242,800 downloads and physical units sold in the first week alone, along with 32.2 million US streams and 18 million US radio impressions. Big Hit also utilized a multi-version release strategy, offering instrumental versions and themed remixes, such as the hotter, sweeter, and cooler versions, priced at a promotional rate of 69 cents, which maximized the purchasing power of the fandom. Instead of quickly falling down the chart, Butter held the top spot for 7 consecutive weeks, proving that the group's streaming and sales velocity could be sustained over months. In July, they released Permission to Dance. In a move that shocked industry analysts, Permission to Dance debuted at number 1 on the chart dated July 24th, replacing Butter at the top of the Hot 100. This made BTS the first group to replace themselves at number 1 since Outkast did so in 2004, and the first group in history to do so with back-to-back number 1 debuts. To put the self-replacement in perspective, when Outkast accomplished this in February 2004,
HYBE had spent 9 weeks at number 1 before The Way You Move finally climbed to the top spot after weeks of steady chart growth. BTS, by contrast, achieved this instantly. Permission to Dance debuted directly at number 1, pushing their own song Butter to number 2, and then Butter reclaimed the number 1 spot the very next week. This level of chart volatility and control had never been recorded by any group in the history of the Billboard charts.
They followed this in October 2021 with My Universe, a collaboration with Coldplay that also debuted at number 1. The creation of My Universe was itself a massive logistical effort, as Coldplay's frontman Chris Martin traveled to Seoul during the height of pandemic travel restrictions and quarantine rules just to record the song in person with BTS. The song's bilingual message and universal themes of unity struck a chord, giving BTS their 5th number 1 debut in a span of just 13 months. The sheer scale of this chart dominance eventually prompted a structural reaction from Billboard. In January 2022, Billboard modified its chart rules, limiting digital download purchases to 1 per customer per week for the purposes of chart calculation, down from the previous limit of 4, while also reducing the weight of digital sales in comparison to streaming. This change was widely interpreted by music industry observers as a direct attempt to curb the influence of highly organized fan bases like ARMY on the Hot 100. Because of this rule change, the mathematical path to debuting a song at number 1 through pure digital sales has been effectively closed, as labels can no longer rely on multiple remix purchases to boost a single's position. Any future artist attempting to replicate BTS's multiple number 1 debuts must rely almost entirely on historic streaming numbers or immediate massive radio support, both of which are highly volatile and difficult to coordinate without a massive global presence. Consequently, BTS's record of multiple Hot 100 number 1 debuts stands as a historic monument to a specific window of chart history that they thoroughly mastered. But as historic as it is to command the digital and physical airwaves of the United States, it is another thing entirely to translate that digital dominance into live, physical stadium attendance on a global scale that rivals the biggest legacy rock bands in history.
Number 4. The most viewers for a music concert live stream. The sudden cancellation of the 2020 Map of the Soul tour due to the global pandemic threatened to halt the commercial and cultural momentum of BTS at the absolute peak of their career. The tour had sold out stadiums across North America, Europe, and Asia, representing millions of prospective tickets. Faced with a complete shutdown of physical live events, the group and their label, Big Hit Entertainment, rejected the low-cost streaming alternatives adopted by other artists, choosing instead to pioneer a high-production, paid virtual concert model that transformed the live streaming industry. The first pilot of this strategy occurred on June 14, 2020, with Bang Bang Con The Live, a 100-minute virtual concert broadcast live from a studio in Seoul. The production featured multiple stage environments, professional camera work, and direct interactions with fans watching at home. The event drew 756,000 paid viewers from 107 countries and territories, setting a Guinness World Record for the most viewers for a live-streamed music concert. This count surpassed the physical seating capacity of 15 sold-out outdoor stadiums. The success of this initial show established a financial and operational blueprint that proved virtual concerts could be highly profitable during global lockdowns. However, this record was quickly shattered by BTS themselves just 4 months later with their next virtual concert, Map of the Soul Own, held on October 10th and 11th, 2020. This 2-day virtual concert event featured a production budget 8 times larger than that of Bang Bang Con The Live. The group performed on 4 massive, technically advanced stages built specifically for the broadcast, incorporating augmented reality, or XR, and extended reality, or XR, to project complex 3-dimensional digital environments that interacted dynamically with the members during their performances. These virtual stages allowed the production team to simulate the grand visual scale of a stadium tour within the physical constraints of a soundstage. For example, during RM's solo track Intro Persona, the broadcast projected a towering 3-dimensional AR shadow of the leader that loomed over the set, while Jungkook's performance of My Time featured a physical rotating carousel built directly on stage to underscore the song's thematic elements. The technological core of the broadcast was a multi-view player developed in partnership with HYBE Mobile, which allowed users to select from 6 high-definition or 4K camera feeds in real time, giving fans control over their viewing experience. To recreate the emotional connection of a live show, the production team installed the Army Wall, a massive array of video screens displaying the live feeds of thousands of fans watching from their homes worldwide. The real-time audio from these fans was integrated directly into the studio monitors, allowing the members of BTS to hear live cheers and fan chants as they performed their choreography. Over the 2-day broadcast, Map of the Soul OWN drew an audited total of 993,000 paid viewers from 191 countries and territories, generating over $44 million in ticket sales alone, before factoring in the purchase of official concert merchandise. HYBE's cloud-based streaming technology successfully handled the immense bandwidth load required to deliver multiple video streams to nearly 1 million concurrent users without any major server disruptions or lag, setting a new standard for large-scale digital events globally. The platform also implemented a real-time translating subtitle system in 4 languages: English, Japanese, Chinese, and Korean, making the concert highly accessible to their diverse international audience. This massive ticket sales count of 993,000 represents a historic peak for paid digital music events, demonstrating that BTS's commercial reach was strong enough to convince a massive audience to pay premium prices for a virtual experience. The geographic distribution of the ticket buyers spanned almost the entire planet, with 191 countries represented out of the 193 member states of the United Nations, proving that the digital model could bypass regional touring barriers and democratize access for fans in South America, Africa, and the Middle East, who are normally excluded from physical tour itineraries. This record is highly insulated from future challengers due to changes in consumer behavior as the world transitioned out of the pandemic era. Once physical music venues reopened, the public's willingness to pay high ticket prices for virtual concert streams declined sharply, and no artist or label has since attempted to produce a paid digital event of this scale. The event remains a monument to a unique historical moment where pandemic lockdowns concentrated global attention online.
And BTS possessed the necessary capital, technical partnerships, and fandom dedication to execute a record-breaking virtual performance. The success of these virtual shows allowed their agency to survive the touring shutdown without major financial losses, funding the company's subsequent acquisitions and investments. Furthermore, the technology developed from Map of the Soul ON has been adopted by other industries for corporate events, sports broadcasts, and hybrid entertainment programs, illustrating the broader legacy of the event. The group's ability to coordinate a global audience of nearly 1 million paying viewers highlights the deep operational organization of the ARMY fandom, who synchronized their local viewing times across different time zones to experience the concert collectively. This level of engagement has not been replicated by any other music group, making the record a permanent milestone in the history of digital music distribution. The visual aesthetics of the show, which combined physical set construction with cutting-edge digital overlays, showed that BTS did not treat the virtual concert as a compromise, but as a distinct art form with its own creative possibilities. The members performed a set list of over 20 songs, demonstrating high physical endurance during a demanding 2-day schedule, which was a critical factor in maintaining the energy of a live broadcast. The performance of their lead single, On, accompanied by a large drum line on a massive set, was highly praised for its choreography and energy, illustrating that the group did not compromise on the scale of their performances despite the lack of a physical crowd. The financial model pioneered by these concerts changed how labels calculate the return on investment for digital events, leading to a broader acceptance of hybrid touring strategies in the modern music business. Despite these industry-wide shifts, the absolute scale of the viewership achieved during Map of the Soul ON remains a statistical outlier that is unlikely to be repeated.
The record stands as a testament to the group's ability to mobilize a global community and leverage advanced streaming technology to overcome physical isolation, establishing a digital legacy that remains unchallenged by any other music group. The event proved that BTS's cultural power could transcend physical barriers, turning a global crisis into a historic milestone of digital innovation and community solidarity. The success of these virtual concerts was not merely a temporary solution to the pandemic, but a permanent demonstration of their status as pioneers of the modern digital landscape. The technological and logistical feats achieved during this era showed that BTS was operating at a level of global influence that few other artists could match, setting the stage for their future achievements at the highest levels of global diplomacy. But while proving they could virtualize a stadium for 1 million people showcased their technical and economic power, it is the physical recognition of their cultural impact by global institutions that truly separated them from the rest of the entertainment world.
Number 3. Most grand prizes won in South Korean music history. To understand the magnitude of BTS's award record, it is necessary to first understand the unique structure of the South Korean music award system. Unlike Western ceremonies like the Grammy Awards, which rely on peer voting from Academy members, or the Billboard Music Awards, which are determined purely by chart metrics, South Korean music awards utilize a hybrid model that blends raw consumer data with expert committee evaluation. The highest honor at any Korean ceremony is the daesong, a term that translates literally to grand prize. Below the daesong are the bonsongs, or main prizes, which are awarded to the top 10 or 12 artists of the year. The daesongs are typically divided into key categories: Artist of the Year, Album of the Year, Song of the Year, and in some ceremonies, Worldwide Icon of the Year. Because these awards are heavily dependent on physical sales tracked by the Circle chart and digital streaming data from domestic platforms like Melon, Genie, and Flow, winning a daesong requires a level of broad public penetration and commercial performance that is difficult to sustain. For decades, these prizes were distributed among the industry's most popular acts, with ceremonies rarely awarding more than one grand prize to a single artist in a given year. For the first 2 decades of the modern K-pop era, the distribution of daesongs was governed by an informal oligopoly. The big 3 entertainment agencies, SM Entertainment, YG Entertainment, and JYP Entertainment, controlled the vast majority of media relations, television appearances, and distribution networks in South Korea. Consequently, their artists routinely swept the major awards, establishing a class of legacy groups that dominated the cultural landscape. When BTS debuted in 2013 under Big Hit Entertainment, a small and financially struggling agency, the prospect of them competing for a daesong was considered statistically impossible. During their early years, the group struggled to secure television broadcast time, often relying on social media to reach their audience directly. The turning point came in 2016 at the Melon Music Awards, where BTS won their first daesong for Album of the Year with The Most Beautiful Moment in Life, Young Forever. The announcement was met with shock and immediate skepticism from industry traditionalists, who questioned the data behind the win. Specifically, at the 2016 Mnet Asian Music Awards, their Artist of the Year win marked the first time an artist not signed to one of the big 3 agencies took home the category since the award show's rebranding in 2009. The victory was a direct result of their Wings album campaign, which had recently debuted on the UK Albums Chart and the Billboard 200, proving to the domestic judges that the group's international appeal had reached a critical mass that could no longer be ignored by the local establishment. However, an analysis of the digital streaming metrics confirmed that BTS's organic growth had outpaced the established agency acts, marking the beginning of a structural shift in the industry. What began as a single hard-fought victory in 2016 quickly evolved into an unprecedented era of absolute dominance. By 2019, BTS's commercial scale had grown to a point where they did not just win Daesongs, they swept them. At the 2019 Melon Music Awards, BTS became the first artist in history to win all 4 grand prizes at a single ceremony. Artist of the Year for Map of the Soul Persona, Song of the Year for Boy with Love, and Record of the Year. A few days later, at the 2019 Mnet Asian Music Awards, MAMA, they repeated this historic feat, capturing all 4 Daesongs offered at that ceremony. This clean sweep phenomenon was not a one-off event. They repeated the 4 Daesong sweep at MAMA in 2020 and again in 2021. To achieve a clean sweep requires an artist to simultaneously have the best-selling physical album of the year, the most streamed song of the year, and the highest overall cultural impact, a combination of achievements that had historically been distributed among different artists to maintain industry balance and prevent viewer fatigue. By the time the members of BTS began transitioning into their mandatory military service in late 2022, they had accumulated a grand total of over 70 Daesongs across all major South Korean music award ceremonies, including the Golden Disc Awards and Seoul Music Awards.
And Korean Music Awards. Their critical recognition was solidified at the Korean Music Awards, often referred to as the Korean Grammys, which are judged solely by music critics, radio producers, and academic scholars without any commercial sales data in the formula. BTS won the Musician of the Year Daesong at the KMAs in both 2018 and 2019, making them the first K-pop idol group to ever win this prestigious critic-led award, which historically favored independent rock and hip-hop acts. Furthermore, at the 35th Golden Disc Awards in 2021, BTS achieved another historic milestone by winning both the Album Daesong and the Digital Daesong in the same year. Historically, the Golden Disc Awards split these 2 grand prizes because boy groups traditionally dominate physical sales, while girl groups and soloists dominate digital streaming. BTS's dual win proved that their digital streaming footprint was large enough to compete directly with the nation's biggest digital-first artists, while their physical sales remained completely unmatched. Guinness World Records officially verified BTS as holding the record for the most Daesongs won at the Mnet Asian Music Awards. The gap between BTS and the second most awarded group in history is massive. The runner-up group holds fewer than half of BTS's total Daesong count. This statistical disparity highlights the degree to which BTS decoupled themselves from the traditional competitive dynamics of the K-pop industry. They had established commercial baselines so high that even in their off years, their catalog's performance remained competitive with the peak years of other top-tier groups. The likelihood of another group breaking this record is extremely low due to the current fragmentation of the music consumer base. Following BTS's temporary enlistment hiatus, the distribution of Daesongs has reverted to its pre-2019 pattern, with awards once again being divided among a rotating cast of successful artists. No single group has managed to consolidate both physical sales and the domestic digital streaming market to the degree required to shut out all other competitors. The algorithms used by award shows have also been adjusted over time to give more weight to diverse music trends, making future clean sweeps mathematically difficult to engineer. BTS's run of over 70 Daesongs represents a unique convergence of a massive global fan base and domestic public appeal that is unlikely to occur again in the highly segmented modern media landscape. Yet, as dominant as they became in capturing the highest accolades of their domestic music industry, their influence soon expanded beyond entertainment circles entirely, leading to a record that placed them not just on stage, but at the center of global diplomacy.
Number 2. The most watched video on the official United Nations YouTube channel. The concept of soft power, first coined by political scientist Joseph Nye in the late 1980s, refers to a nation's ability to co-opt rather than coerce, using cultural and political appeal to shape the preferences of others. In the late 1990s, the South Korean government recognized that cultural exports could serve as a vital engine for economic recovery and global diplomatic influence, leading to the deliberate cultivation of the Korean Wave, or Hallyu. While early diplomatic efforts focused on promoting traditional cuisine, cinema, and television dramas, the rise of K-pop in the 2010s provided the state with an entirely new asset. BTS eventually emerged as the premier emblem of this cultural soft power, transitioning from successful entertainers to official representatives of the state's foreign policy interests. This integration of pop culture and high-level diplomacy culminated in a series of engagements with the United Nations, an institution historically characterized by rigid protocol, formal speeches, and bureaucratic deliberations. The presence of BTS in this environment was not a simple publicity stunt. It was a structured diplomatic campaign designed to engage a global youth demographic that had become increasingly alienated from traditional multilateral organizations. BTS's relationship with the United Nations began in earnest in September 2018, when they were invited to attend the launch of UNICEF's Generation Unlimited partnership at the 73rd UN General Assembly in New York. The partnership aimed to ensure that every young person is in education, training, or employment by 2030. Representing the group, Kim Namjoon, known professionally as RM, delivered a 6-minute speech titled "Speak Yourself" in the Trusteeship Council chamber. Speaking before world leaders, diplomats, and UN officials, he detailed his personal journey of self-acceptance, encouraging young people to raise their voices regardless of their gender, race, or background. The video of the speech quickly circulated on social media, generating millions of views and introducing the work of UNICEF to a vast, highly engaged audience. This initial engagement established BTS as credible global advocates, leading to a second address in September 2020 during the 75th UN General Assembly, where they delivered a pre-recorded message of solidarity and hope to a world struggling with the isolation of pandemic lockdowns. The relationship reached a formal political milestone in July 2021 when South Korean President Moon Jae-in officially appointed the members of BTS as special presidential envoys for future generations and culture. This was a formal state appointment governed by South Korean law, marking the first time active pop musicians had been formally drafted into the nation's diplomatic corps. At the Blue House ceremony on September 14, 2021, President Moon Jae-in highlighted that the appointment was a recognition of the group's global influence and their ability to communicate critical global issues such as climate change and poverty alleviation to the younger generation in a way that traditional state actors simply could not duplicate. During the ceremony, the members were presented with official certificates of appointment and diplomatic passports. These red passports, distinct from the green passports carried by ordinary South Korean citizens, granted the members diplomatic immunity under the Vienna Convention on Diplomatic Relations, as well as visa-free travel to countries that typically require entry clearances for South Korean nationals. The appointment meant that BTS was traveling to the 76th UN General Assembly in September 2021 not as celebrity guests, but as official members of the South Korean government's state delegation, traveling on official diplomatic business alongside the president. On September 20, 2021, BTS took the podium in the General Assembly Hall to address the Sustainable Development Goals moment. Their speech focused on the perspective of the youth generation who had lived through the disruptions of the COVID-19 pandemic.
They rejected the popular media label of the lost generation, reframing them as the welcome generation, young people who were actively searching for solutions and adapting to a rapidly changing world. Following their address, the UN broadcasted a pre-recorded performance of their single "Permission to Dance," which had been filmed on the grounds of the UN headquarters. The performance began inside the empty General Assembly Hall, transitioned through the building's lobby and corridors, and concluded on the outdoor UN plaza overlooking the East River. The choreography for the performance was specifically modified to incorporate international sign language gestures for words representing dance, love, and peace, aligning the performance with the UN's values of global inclusivity and accessibility. The filming of the performance took place over several days under strict security protocols overseen by the United Nations Security and Safety Service. The production team had to work during off hours to prevent disruption to the active diplomatic sessions happening within the complex, utilizing quiet periods to capture the sweeping views of the empty General Assembly Hall and the outdoor plaza. The digital fallout of this diplomatic performance was immediate. The official United Nations YouTube channel, which typically serves as a repository for committee meetings, press briefings, and policy documentaries, experienced an unprecedented surge in global traffic. The live broadcast of the 2021 SDG moment peaked at over 1 million concurrent viewers, which represented a 10-fold increase over the channel's previous record for a live broadcast, forcing the UN's digital team to coordinate with YouTube to ensure their servers could manage the traffic. The video of BTS's UNGA speech and Permission to Dance performance quickly crossed 10 million views within its first 48 hours. It has since accumulated over 40 million views, officially becoming the most watched video in the history of the United Nations YouTube channel. For comparison, the average video uploaded to the channel struggles to clear 10,000 views, highlighting the statistical anomaly of BTS's presence. The likelihood of another group breaking this record is extremely remote, as it requires a rare alignment of domestic government policy, international institutional access, and global fandom mobilization. Most sovereign nations do not issue diplomatic passports to active pop groups, and the UN rarely permits commercial filming inside its high-security chambers. The record stands as a physical monument to a moment when the worlds of high-stakes diplomacy and global pop music converged, drawing the eyes of millions to an institution that typically operates far outside the mainstream media spotlight. But as historic as it is to represent a nation on the floor of the United Nations, there is one final, ultimate metric of music industry dominance that remains the standard by which all legendary artists are judged, and it is a record that BTS holds so securely that it may never be challenged by any group in our lifetime.
Number 1. The most streamed group in Spotify history. The global music industry's transition from physical sales to digital streaming in the mid-2010s fundamentally altered how musical popularity is measured, valued, and sustained. In this new ecosystem, Spotify emerged as the dominant global platform, establishing a footprint that spans over 180 countries and commands a user base of hundreds of millions of active listeners. Streaming democratized access to music, allowing listeners to explore global catalogs instantaneously, but it also created a highly fragmented marketplace where maintaining long-term listener attention became increasingly difficult. In the physical era, an artist's success was measured in discrete purchasing events. In the streaming era, it is measured in continuous, repeated plays over time. For a group to achieve dominance on a platform like Spotify, they must build a listener base that does not merely consume new releases passively, but returns to a deep catalog of past work on a daily basis. BTS entered this streaming landscape at a time when K-pop was still viewed by Western DSPs, digital service providers, as a niche genre. Yet they went on to establish a digital footprint that surpassed the most successful English-language groups in history. In March 2023, Guinness World Records officially updated their database to certify BTS as the most streamed group in Spotify history, with their collective catalog having surpassed 31.96 billion streams on the platform. By late 2023, this figure had officially climbed past 35 billion streams, and it continues to grow by several billion streams each year.
This metric did not include the individual solo profiles of the members, which have independently accumulated billions of additional streams, but focused strictly on the group's official discography. To appreciate the scale of this record, one must compare BTS's streaming totals with those of the most prominent legacy bands in the Western music industry. Groups like Coldplay, Imagine Dragons, Maroon 5, and Linkin Park, acts that have spent decades on global radio playlists and possess massive cross-generational hit catalogs, sit behind BTS in cumulative Spotify plays. Within their catalog, individual tracks have set historic benchmarks on their own. Their 2020 single, Dynamite, became the first song by a Korean act to surpass 1 billion streams on Spotify, followed later by Butter and My Universe, making BTS the only Korean group to have multiple entries in Spotify's exclusive Billions Club. This inclusion in the Billions Club placed BTS in a highly exclusive tier of global pop artists, marking the first time a non-Western group had established multiple billion-stream tracks on the platform, further solidifying their transition from regional icons to permanent fixtures of the global music lexicon. Reaching 30+ billion streams on Spotify is mathematically impossible through the performance of a few viral singles alone. A typical pop act might achieve several 100 million streams on a handful of radio hits, but their album tracks and older catalog pieces often experience a sharp drop-off in active plays. BTS's streaming profile is structurally different due to the depth and consistency of their discography, which spans over 300 songs across Korean and Japanese studio albums, EPs, and compilations.
The ARMY fandom operates a highly organized streaming culture that treats the group's entire discography as a living catalog. Consequently, non-promoted B-side tracks such as Microcosmos, Silver Spoon, Bepse, Home, and Pied Piper routinely accumulate hundreds of millions of streams, performing at levels that match or exceed the lead singles of other successful artists. This distributed streaming pattern creates a high baseline of daily catalog plays that continues to accumulate volume even during periods when the group is not actively releasing new material or touring. The geographic distribution of BTS's streams reveals a highly diversified global audience. Unlike many domestic Korean acts whose streaming volume is concentrated in East Asia, or Western acts whose listeners are primarily in North America and Europe, BTS's streaming data is spread across multiple major markets simultaneously. Southeast Asian nations like Indonesia, the Philippines, and Thailand generate massive, consistent play counts, while Japan and South Korea provide a stable domestic base. In North America, the United States remains one of their top streaming markets, complemented by significant listening volumes in Latin American countries like Brazil and Mexico. This global diversification acts as a hedge against localized shifts in platform usage or regional economic fluctuations. When streaming volume experiences seasonal declines in one part of the world, it is often offset by promotional campaigns or fan activities in another, ensuring that the group's daily cumulative stream count remains highly stable year-round. From a financial perspective, the scale of BTS's streaming record translates to a significant revenue stream that operates with minimal overhead. While the average royalty payout per stream on Spotify is small, typically estimated between $0.003 and $0.005, the multiplication of this rate by over 30 billion plays yields an economic output in the tens of millions of dollars. This passive income stream has provided their agency, HYBE, with the capital reserves necessary to expand its corporate footprint, acquire international entertainment companies, and fund new technological ventures. The record is also highly insulated from future challengers due to the mathematics of cumulative growth. Even during the group's temporary hiatus for military service, their catalog continued to generate billions of streams annually. Any new group attempting to challenge this record would not only need to match BTS's current total, but they would have to outpace this ongoing passive accumulation rate. In an era where streaming platforms are increasingly saturated with content and user attention is highly fragmented, the likelihood of a new group replicating the sustained global coordination required to reach these numbers is close to zero. The record stands as the ultimate testament to a group that did not just participate in the digital music revolution, but fundamentally rewrote the rules of global pop stardom.